Welcome to Talking Out Cloud, the podcast where we discuss the latest trends in IT and cloud. And in today's episode, we're talking hybrid cloud. And is hybrid the future of public clouds? Welcome, let's talk. Today I've got with me Gert-Jan, and we're changing things up a bit because we used to be with the three of us and now it's just the two of us, and we're going to talk more tech. And Denis is still with us. He's still our beloved colleague, but we changed it up. So let's see how that goes. And today it's hybrid cloud.
Yeah, hybrid cloud. It is. Shall we introduce ourselves?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Let's introduce ourselves. You go.
My name is Gert-Jan Poffers. I'm an Azure consultant. I work with Intercept for about a year now, doing projects, Azure projects, giving advice on Azure environments. Yeah, all stuff with Azure, I guess.
All right. Yeah. Well, the same for me. I'm a principal architect, Microsoft Azure MVP. I do some recordings, do some YouTube stuff, and I do the same thing. I design customer stuff. I design environments. I implement them. I do some testing, and I talk a lot with you.
Yeah, that is true. That is true.
Okay, so hybrid clouds, and it's something that comes and goes. And 1 year we talk about hybrid, the other year we don't, and then there's a new development, or there's elections or geopolitical influences, and then we talk about hybrid again. But before we talk hybrid, what do we have? We've got private, on-prem, and
I think we all know the situation that we had all private clouds. I think back in the days it all started with we had the servers in our own basement on the company, hosting our own Exchange server, hosting our own service. We later then stepped up to data centers to host it in a private data centers. And the next step we see probably 10 years ago, step to public clouds. Azure, AWS, Google, all those public clouds, where you host your SaaS or PaaS services. It has some positive sides to host your service and your workloads in a data center. But what are the positive things about doing that in a combination? That's maybe the question. But why do you want to use a hybrid cloud solution?
Well, I think that is the use case.
Yeah,
you want to do a combination of things, and there's more like you can do it, but there's a big why, and then there's a why not. I think before we go into that, you've got on-premise. I think on-premise. I mean, do we still do that? Do we still invest in a server room and the floor and the cables underneath the floor and the
you
racks?
Don't want that.
Nobody does that anymore. So I think you've got the flavors. You've got the private cloud. You've got hybrid. You've got public.
Yeah.
And then you could argue that hybrid is a combination of public and private.
Yep.
Right? You've got some stuff in public, some stuff in private. But then, what if you do multi-cloud? Is that also hybrid? What's that?
That's a good question. I think multi-cloud has also some very good positive effects if you look at it cost-wise. So you have a workload and you wanted to host it as cheap as possible. You can use multi-cloud for that example. But if you it also depends on what is your workload, what is your where do you want to store your data? Do you want to host it to come back in a private data center, or do you want to store your data in a public cloud? Do you want to store it in a multi-tenant situation on multiple locations? That's I think that's the question, and that's the question you need to ask yourself as a company.
Yeah, in the end, it's all about money.
It's all about money.
But that's the thing. Even with hybrid, why would you do it, or why do you do public cloud, or with the geopolitical stuff going on and data residency or data sovereignty, right? We're talking about, can we keep our data within European borders? And if you use those big public clouds like Google, AWS, or Amazon, or Microsoft, yes, you can host your data in Europe, for example. We've got the whole GDPR thing. And then, yes, the story is foreign governments cannot access our data.
Yep.
But then there's still foreign companies. And in the end, it's about money. I mean, if it's going to cost them enough,
True.
by law, they could still technically share your data, right? So the question is, how often does that happen? Does it happen? Is it something to be scared about? I don't think so. I think we've adopted public clouds at scale, but it's about money. In the end, someone in the boardroom is going to make the decision. I'm fine with public clouds. I'm fine with my data being shared or stored at place XYZ.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's the thing. If that is okay, it's about money. But if it's going to cost them money, for example, a customer says, no, I want my data to be there in that specific location or in that specific region, or else I will no longer be a customer. And if that momentum grows and if that gets big enough, then someone in the boardroom will make the decision, I want my data to be stored locally or in a private cloud, or I want to have a hybrid setup, because it's about money. It's not because we don't trust the foreign governments. In the end, it's about money.
It's all about money.
It's always about money.
It's always about money. And also keep in mind that also if you store your data in a public cloud, it's safe. But if you want to have more control about your data, then that's maybe sometimes a use case to say, hey, I want to use my own private clusters to store my data with my own managed keys, because that's possible. Back in the days, you all know the Red Vault principle, that you have your own backup data stored in a vault at your own company or multiple companies when there's some emergency at hand. So. Also in public cloud, if for example a government or health or some financial criteria or compliance as one point of their compliance that needs to be stored in a private cluster, then you can use a hybrid cloud solution for that. So there are possibilities also with Azure Local, but I think, and that's also a good point to notice. If you want to have guarantee, if we talk about capacity in public clouds, or you want to have a guarantee. If you have a workload, for example, Kubernetes, and you want to have a guaranteed capacity in your public cloud, you can use, for example, Azure Local to add your own hardware to the Azure public cloud as a capacity solution. That's maybe a good use.
That's an interesting use case that I hadn't thought of. I was more in the you just mentioned security, right? Yeah. So public clouds, I think about 10 years ago, I used to do sessions where we would convince people to use the public cloud, right? It was the sales pitch, and I did pre-sales conversations. And then one of the things I said was, all right, so if you have on-prem environments, you've got your own data center and you've got your own racks, and you have to manage that. Yeah. And it means you also have to manage who has access to it. And the place I worked before, it was I had access, the IT team had access, but also the technical maintenance people had access because, part of that system was running there as well. And then it was always about, I want to know where my data is. But then if you know where your data is and you look at what you have on-prem technically and what you can have in a public cloud and how secure that is, that nobody can access the data center. And I mean, I'd rather have my data running in the public cloud. Yeah. Or stored in the public cloud than on-prem, because they invest way more.
Way more. It is more new hardware, more possibilities. When there's an outage or a breach, they have fixed it by the time you already know about it. So definitely. That's also what I prefer. Use public cloud, but it's always good to know that you can use the hybrid cloud solution when you want to have the feeling that you have more control about your data, that you can use it in combination with a public cloud.
And you just said capacity. That sparked my interest because we do a lot of Microsoft Azure. Yeah. We have some challenges in West Europe. Yeah. It's one of those hero regions, if you will. Yeah. So all the new stuff is coming there, and then with the big AI boom, then we want to use more and more and more. We have to spread the capacity across Europe, but then we're used to picking the West Europe region, and customers expect that. So we cannot always use West Europe. So you just said, with Azure Local, will that solve capacity problems?
I think so that it can solve. There are also other solutions to fix that problem in West Europe. Speaking about Kubernetes, you can also use different methods to spread your workloads in different regions. But I think Azure Local can be a solution that you place your own hardware in the cloud. To overcome the capacity problem as a workaround or as a temporary solution. But yeah, I think that's definitely a solution. Yeah.
And so we've had different iterations of Azure Local, right? It started with I like to, you got Microsoft Defender for Cloud, and then you've got Azure Defender for Cloud, and you rebrand that to a different name, and they do that every couple of months. So it feels
always
kind of feels the same thing with Azure Local, right? It started with Azure Stack, where they had to do the big investment, like the big racks you had to buy. And then it became was it Azure Stack HCI, where you buy something, you run it, and now you've got Azure Local, where it's more a bring your own hardware kind of thing.
Yeah, it's definitely bring your own hardware kind of thing, because it means that you can when it's called Azure HCI stack, it was dependent on the hardware you purchased, that you can only use that specific hardware and give it to the cloud. But now you can place everything in the cloud with if it has a hard disk and a manufacturer and some memory, you can place it in the cloud. So yeah, you can definitely do that. Yeah.
All right. So technically, I can do my pay-as-you-go part. It runs in Azure, and I pay per month. And then I've got some on-prem hardware, or I've got some hardware. Maybe not on-prem. Maybe I also have access to a private cloud, like a data center. And I've got some hardware running there, because that's what we see as well, right? In a private data center or private cloud, I have to say, you don't usually pay per use. You invest in something, it's hosted there, and if you want more memory, then the data center provider goes, all right, we can do that, but you have to pay for that. So it's more of like an investment kind of thing. Other than that, you do have private clouds where you can pay per use, right? So I can have my hardware hosted there. So let's say I invested in some NVIDIA GPUs. Some Kubernetes stuff, and I don't want to pay for that in Azure. That would be the use case then.
That will be the use case. That is one use case. So you can do your workload in the private cluster that's being onboarded in Azure. But another use case is probably disaster recovery. So if you want to have a fallback solution for the public cloud, you can say, hey, I want to recover in a private data center that's maybe onboarded or connected to my public cloud, and run my workload on that.
Oh, that's interesting. Do you think that is does Azure Local make hybrid a viable option?
I think it's definitely a viable option. For me, I prefer. I trust the public cloud. So like you said, and I also like the cost efficiency with the public cloud. But there are definitely use cases for hybrid cloud when you think about disaster recovery, spread your workloads about different dependencies. So yeah, I think there's definitely a future.
All right. So then we've got the processing locally, and then probably something like data storage could also be a thing. But then we're still talking about our own private data center, right? So if we go on to the topic of data sovereignty and what we see now happening in the world, and where companies will go, all right, maybe I just want my data to be stored in a specific place where I know it's stored, and my legal department signed off on it. And I don't think that's something that's going to happen tomorrow. I mean, still, these are boardroom and money decisions. So, but at the next iteration of cloud, where people are like, all right, so what is the next iteration of my software architecture going to be? What is my infrastructure going to look like? That will be something top of mind. Like, hey, do we want to have So picture this. You have the public clouds. You've got your processing running all around the world. You don't care about whether it's the United States or Finland or France, or you don't care. Can run anywhere. But then you want your data to be stored locally in a private data center.
Yeah.
Or maybe in a European cloud. We went to KubeCon, and there was this announcement called NeoNephos.
Yes.
Which is the new European cloud. I think it's backed by European Union as well, but also some big companies.
CNCF is full pull on that. Yes, maybe a little bit of a counter reaction on everything stored, like you said, in America or in the United States. Europe doesn't. It has some public clouds, but it's not local, not widely spread.
No.
So they will collaborate with big parties to create something as a counter attack, of a counter reaction.
Counter reaction. Yeah, I saw SAP, T-Systems investing in it, European Union themselves.
Yeah.
But then I don't believe that everyone's going to move to a European cloud.
No.
Simply because it will be way more expensive. It's less scalable.
Yes.
It's smaller, so more expensive. I mean, the fact, I did a talk last week where I said, all right, so what makes things like OpenAI affordable? Because it's a shared model. We all pay a little bit for the tokens that we use.
Yeah.
So they can invest in good processing and fast processing, and we all pay for a small part of that.
Yeah.
So it's accessible. If you make something smaller and you scope it to a smaller group, like Europe itself, it will be more expensive. But I think there might be a scenario in the future where you have some, regional clouds, like let's call them regional clouds, like Europe as a region, where you use the public cloud for some processing and the latest cool technologies, but then your data storage or data processing or residency will be in that European cloud. And that will be a hybrid setup where you use not multi-cloud. For me is like you do AWS and Azure, right? And then I don't really believe in I believe in cloud agnostic, which means you develop for multiple clouds, and multi-cloud for me is just hosting in different clouds, which is always more expensive. But what if hybrid would be public cloud and private cloud combined?
That is what I said in my. I think that's the future, because if you are already in the public cloud, then moving to a private cloud can be really hard, expensive, time save. It will cost you a lot of time. So a good workaround is to use then hybrid cloud. I think if you have the things you have said before. So if you want to store your data in a specific region, because if you are already in the public cloud, you're already have the is vendor lock maybe a good
vendor lock is interesting.
Is that a good word? And it all began I think with bringing the steps. We all know that we have Mailbox running Exchange server. We then stepped to Microsoft 365. That's the first step in the public cloud world. After that, companies are moving to Azure, and I really support that. Don't get me wrong, but if you want to go back, that is the hard part, and I think that more and more companies, if they want to have some more control, and I think is that needed? I don't think that is needed, but if they want to have some more feeling of control about the data, then a combination with a hybrid solution is the way to go, I think.
Well, you briefly mentioned or indirectly mentioned standardization. So management. You said vendor lock-in. I think with Azure Local, that's interesting because let's say I call the Azure APIs for the things I do. I write some code and I'm calling the ARM APIs. If I do Azure Local, I can call the same APIs.
Yeah, true.
So I can manage my hybrid setup with the same. But that's interesting because then we're still using that's absolute vendor lock-in, right?
Yeah.
But that will go away if I decide I will do public cloud and the hybrid cloud or a European cloud, because those are managed differently.
Those are managed differently. So, but that's also a question because if you look at the European cloud, if you go, how do you think it will then communicate with each other? If you are going to if you have always used to have it stored in your Microsoft Azure, for example, how do you think that will happen?
I think this may be an unpopular opinion or not, but I don't care. I think Kubernetes is the answer here.
Yes.
So what if, well, we've got hybrid cloud, we've got public cloud, we've got private cloud, but what if we use a platform to build our own clouds? Like with Kubernetes, that is one standardized API, and it can run on-prem, Azure Local, AWS, my mom's basement, everywhere. Kubernetes can run everywhere.
Everywhere, yeah.
And as long as I've got access to the hardware and I have access to the Kubernetes API, the management is the same. So I think in the future, that's what we will do. We will, we'll already containerize a lot of solutions, but with Kubernetes, you deploy it anywhere. You can host your workload anywhere, and then you still have some specific vendor lock-in things, right? So let's say I do Kubernetes and my workload uses Azure Key Vault. Obviously, that's not going to work in AWS, and obviously that's not going to work in the European cloud. But then we have solutions like Dapper, which is a runtime that you run next to your workload. You write your code for Dapper. So you write code and you tell Dapper, I want to store secrets. And in the background, we are IT ops people, we make sure that we have infrastructure in the background that Dapper can talk to. So we tell Dapper, today you're talking to Key Vault, but tomorrow you're talking to, table storage or something else.
Exactly.
And our developers just write for that specific stack, which is containerized workloads and Dapper.
Exactly.
I think that's where the future is, because then we have the option to move from one cloud to the other.
Then the backbone doesn't really matter. It's just the workload what you are creating.
And then vendor lock-in. Yes, then you have a vendor lock-in with Kubernetes, but that's always going to happen. You have to make decisions on
exactly. You need to make a decision on which platform you want to run Kubernetes, for example. But where it run, it doesn't really matter for the. Definitely.
And still on the topic of hybrid, we also have a use case that is being used a lot, but everyone always forgets about.
Tell me.
It's edge computing.
Yeah.
When we do our, I did some projects back in the day with IoT Hub. So you have your processing and your information gathering in the cloud. So you use the power of the public cloud to process the information, but then you've got hundreds or thousands or millions of IoT devices on site. And then what the hybrid use case is here is you have to process a lot of data. And if all those devices are going to connect to Azure themselves, that's a lot of traffic. And then, data traffic, it's not that expensive, but at scale, it can be, yeah. You don't want to end up with a bill at the end of the month where 50% of the money goes to network traffic, right? Sure. So what you do is you have IoT devices, and then you have some edge computing, maybe some systems locally, like on-prem machines.
Yes.
But then you could even have a private cloud locally. So let's say we're in Zwolle right now. We've got a data center here. What if I have a company here in Zwolle with a lot of IoT devices, and I send the data to the local data center here for initial gathering? Image recognition is one of those things, right? I can leverage small AI models in that data center to get the information from the images, which is then serialized into a JSON payload with the information I need. So it's like I see a car, and it's a car, it's that color, it's got that license plate. That's the information I want from the picture. That's the information, those 3 keys and values, that's what I send to the cloud, which is way less traffic than sending the video images. So I see a big use case there as well, and that is being used a lot.
Yeah.
Because doing that, having all those devices sent directly to the public cloud, that's
definitely
quite expensive.
That's a good use case.
All right, so if we are to, and this is interesting, we said Kubernetes, which is like the platform on top of the public cloud or on top of the cloud. How do we provision Kubernetes? Is the answer then something like Terraform, or we do a lot of Azure Bicep?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really good question. If you wanted to program it specifically for one cloud, in this case, what we do most often is Microsoft Azure. Then we use Bicep. But if you want to have a multiple approach, I think you need to use Terraform, right? There are other tools you can use for infrastructure as code, but I think Terraform is the
Well, for public clouds, I mean, why do we not do a lot of Terraform right now? Is well, we do Microsoft Azure.
Yeah.
So Bicep is the answer. It's the cloud native solution for Microsoft Azure. Doing it multi-cloud or doing Terraform means that we lose access to day zero support for new features. So let's say something we like playing with preview stuff, right?
Yes.
That's not always available in Terraform. No. But if we say we standardize on a platform like Kubernetes, do we need the day zero stuff? Probably not, because I mean we can even run VMs on Kubernetes. Maybe that's where we'll go to. We'll use the public clouds for their infrastructure and for the gimme Kubernetes, and then we run all our other stuff on Kubernetes. I think, I mean, it does bring a lot of things like interoperability, right? We can pick something up and move it to the next cluster.
Yes.
So that's also, I'm thinking money. But what if I think, let's say I'm a big enterprise. I've got thousands of containers running. And I can just tell them, all right, run in the cheapest cloud at this point.
That is what you want, because like you said, it's all about money at the end. We can do that, right?
We can. Well, you got things like Fleet. We went to KubeCon. We had a nice demo on Kube Fleet.
That was a really good demo, because it shows you that you can the platform where you want to deploy it is not really the question.
No,
the question is when, where, and how.
And we could even give it parameters, right? So we could even during our deployment. So you send your deployment to the Fleet API, and then the Fleet API will determine which environment do I have access to and is best fit. And I can give it labels, so I can tell it I need GPUs. I need GPUs of that type. I need specific CPUs. I need persistent storage, and maybe that's cheaper there. Or I want it to be as sustainable and environment friendly as possible. So pick one for me.
Yes.
And that is very interesting. And well, I said sustainability, but then I think that's also about money, right?
At the long last,
I had
that's a good question, by the way.
I had that discussion last week, and yes, sustainability is important. And we all have to do better, which we can if we do it well. Specifically in these public clouds, we got all these dashboards. But in the end, it's still let's the same example goes for performance. If I build something epic, best performing solution ever, greenest solution ever, and I want to sell it, and then someone from sales or commercial team says, this is what we're going to charge for it. And I've got a CFO who's going to ask, what is it going to cost? And then if it's not beneficial from a money perspective, then someone in the boardroom will go, maybe a little less performance, maybe a little less greener is also fine, because at the end of the day, I still want to drive my car and buy some food for my kids, right?
Yeah.
So
that is a good question, by the way. But there's also different. I think that you can fill a whole podcast about sustainability with.
And we will.
We will do that. But I think to come back at the first part, it's all about money. What is the cost about spreading your workloads? Is it sustainable? Yeah, we want all sustainability. But at the end, the most important thing for the financial managers.
I think I'm just thinking, we're talking out loud, but I'm thinking out loud here. So what I was reading an article the other day that once every few years, they would invest in new GPUs for data centers, right? And that would be like once every 2 years. And then it went back to once every year.
Yeah.
And then we see the NVIDIA stocks going through the roof.
Yeah.
Because now they're developing so fast.
Yeah.
Every 6 months, they add new types of GPUs to data centers. So what happens to the old ones? Can we buy them? Can we host them in our private cloud? Can we use a hybrid solution to leverage them?
I think that's a really good question. I think if you talk about private and public cloud, so in the private cloud, when you buy your stuff from the private cloud, you will have 3, 4, 5 years ahead, and then you will sign those hardware off, and maybe you throw it away, or you will I don't know. But in the public cloud, it will be is being recycled, right? So if you have if they have invest in new hardware, the old hardware will probably being recycled in other workloads. So, for example, for storage or for so in the case of sustainability, it's probably the public cloud is probably more sustainable than a private data center. I think.
Yeah, I think specifically from that recycling perspective.
Yeah.
I mean, well, when I was working at a place where we had our on-prem cloud or on-prem server room, once you would write the servers off in like 3 years, but then you want to extend it with like a care package for a 4th year.
Yeah, exactly.
And then, I'm all about taking risks, so let's do 5 years, but then it has to go. And then specifically with disks, we would have a company come pick up the disks and like get rid of them, like break them, like terminate them, like
destruct them,
like proper destruction. You get a certificate, like, hey, your data was. That's not recycling. That's getting rid of things.
That is just throwing away.
Public clouds can probably do that better. Okay, but then if they get rid of those GPU cards because they're replacing them, then I think, maybe put them up for sale and we can start our own bit mining. I don't know.
There are big cars, so you can make use of them. To be honest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So if we look at hybrid, yes, it has a future.
Yes.
Probably more than ever.
Yeah.
Because now it's it's not an emerging technology. We've had this, but with what's happening in the world and being greener, and maybe it's interesting.
We doing this all along. To be honest, hybrid cloud is probably already here for 8 years. So there's definitely a future for that.
And we do it right. We have customers that still have on-prem service, and we do something like Azure Arc, and then we see the service in Azure themselves. So that is, I would say that's like hybrid 1.0. I think 2.0, the next step, is where we look at regional storage of data.
Yeah,
regional processing of data, and also looking at making that affordable. I think comes down to money. If we can do that, it does have a future.
Then we will search for a use case for that, I guess.
Yeah,
definitely.
And I think that you mentioned CNCF, the Cloud Native Compute Foundation. They have a lot of tools focused on, or projects. We need to call them projects. Focused on orchestration, orchestration of infrastructure, deployment of infrastructure. I mean, that ecosystem is going to be leading in how we deal with hybrid clouds, because not ever will we go back to point and click in different clouds, right?
No, that's not efficient. You need to do that automatic, based on algorithms and that sort of tooling.
All right.
Yeah.
So maybe in 5 years' time, maybe in 10 years' time, we'll look at this and go, we went from on-prem to public cloud dominance to hybrid.
To hybrid. I think so.
I think you're right.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you for that. And we can talk about this for another 2 hours, but
definitely.
We should not.
Definitely.
Well, thank you for joining me. I'm looking forward to the next episode.
Thank you, Wesley.
And have a nice day. And everyone, thank you for listening. Thank you for watching, and see you next episode.